The Candle and the Darkness by Aric Sundquist. 1. The darkness comes at dawn. Megan watched her mother grip the wristwatch. She tightened the winder as far as it would go, then handed the watch over, dangling it from the leather band like a pendulum. Megan plucked the watch out of the air. Although the item was small, it still felt heavy in her hands, but it also felt comforting, like a miniature heartbeat. It felt alive. "Make sure it never stops," her mother warned, "and wind it every morning." "Okay. So, tell me again. How long do you have to wait here?" 3 days. "Right. And how many hours is that?" Megan counted on her fingers. 72, she answered proudly. "Smart girl." Her mother hugged Megan and didn't let go for a long time. "You're going to get hungry, Megan, and thirsty. But you have to fight it, okay? You have to stay here no matter what, and never leave the safety of the light." "I won't. I mean it." Megan nodded. "Now, I have to go find your dad." Her mother stood up from the tile floor and crept to the edge of the candlelight. "I promised I would never leave him again." The kitchen was gone, consumed by a darkness that churned and roiled like thick storm clouds. Megan had seen pictures of black holes in her science book. She knew they were powerful enough to swallow whole planets and moons. There was no doubt in her mind that this darkness could do the same thing and eat them both up. Maybe the entire house itself. Her mother stopped at the edge of the light and turned to Megan. "I love you," she said. "I'll go find Dad, and we'll all be together again soon, I promise." Her mother blew a kiss. Then she stepped inside the darkness and was gone. 2. Luckily, she saved the candle. Megan's mother had received the candle as a confirmation gift when she was just a young girl. It was a thick candle, crimson in color with a squat silver base. Megan knew her mother wasn't religious anymore, because the church people did mean things to her growing up. Megan often wondered why her mom kept the candle at all. It must have reminded her of something good. A little over a year before, the power had gone out all across the city. The batteries in their flashlight were dead, so Megan had helped her mother rummage around in the closet. Eventually, they found the candle in a chest full of old yearbooks and high school tennis medals. This was the first time Megan had ever seen the candle. Then, her mother set the candle in the center of the kitchen table and said it matched perfectly with the cherry wood top. She lit the wick with some matches and was surprised that it still held a flame after so many years. Megan's father came home shortly afterward from his afternoon shift. A month before, he hadn't come home at all. He stayed in a hotel and called them on the phone. Megan's mother had said that they just needed some time alone and that he would be back very soon. But they seemed to be getting along better now, and he was home again. That made Megan feel good. That night, the three of them sat around the flame and played Go Fish and Crazy Eights and ate popsicles that had started to melt. Megan liked the orange ones the best. Her mother liked purple, and her dad liked banana, so everything was rationed off with ease. After 2 hours, the power sputtered back on. But then, her dad crept away and flipped the circuit breaker off, saying the power had gone out again. Megan knew it was him, but didn't say anything because she was having so much fun. They played cards by candlelight until well after her bedtime. And ever since that night, the candle remained on the table, unlit. 3. The father crosses first. 3 days before her 10th birthday, Megan heard something in her closet. It sounded like fingernails scratching across wood. At first, she thought of opening it up, but when she got closer, she heard voices whispering on the other side. They told her to open the door. When she didn't comply, they said mean things. So, Megan woke up her dad instead. He was tough and would deal with it properly. He listened to her story while throwing on his robe, telling her they would go take a look. He lifted her up on his shoulders like a backpack and carried her to her room, telling her she could watch Saturday morning cartoons in an hour or so. He had tucked her in bed and was just ready to flick off the lights when he heard the voices too. Megan had never seen her dad look scared. His whole body froze for a moment, fingers on the light switch. Then he lifted her chair over his head like a club and twisted the doorknob. The door exploded outward, and the darkness had him. It melted over him like dark syrup, and he dropped the weapons, grabbing the sides of the doorway with his hands. The darkness closed around him like a blanket, enveloping him. And then he was gone. His severed arms fell to the floor. Megan knew she had to get out of her room. She opened the shades and thought about pushing out the screen and jumping down onto the lawn, but she froze. There was no morning sunshine cresting the horizon, no blue clouds, no birds singing. There were abandoned cars and people scurrying about, and no sun at all. Black fog crept through the alleyways and streets. She heard people screaming. She jumped off her bed and ran out of her room just as her nightlight flickered and went out. Overhead, the light bulbs along the hallway exploded and rained shards in her hair. Groping around in the dark, she missed the first step and stumbled down the hallway stairs. Downstairs, her mother lit the candle and asked why she was running around so early in the morning. Then she saw the blackness shift and swirl and race toward them like a chaotic tidal wave. The darkness hit the candlelight and stopped. "The candle is keeping it away," her mother said after some time, holding her daughter tightly. "Why?" Megan asked, crying. "What's happening?" "I think it's the 3 days of darkness. It's from the Bible, Megan. From what I remember, hell is unleashed on the world for 3 days, claiming all non-believers. We're safe here, though, as long as the candle is lit. The only thing that keeps the darkness at bay is a blessed candle. Nothing else will stop it." Her mother cupped the candle and walked slowly from the table toward the kitchen sink. Megan held her mother's sweatshirt. They stopped right where the sink was supposed to be, but there was nothing left, just an empty void. Then they began hearing the voices. 4. The sun is not blessed. Megan had gone to school for 4 years with a boy named Robert Mullins. Then, one day, he hung himself in his closet. A letter was found in his pocket, a list of people who had hurt him in school. Nothing more, just 30 names. The list contained the entire 3rd grade class, all except Megan and 2 others. Megan hated bullies. She treated everyone with respect. If people were mean, she tried her best to ignore them. So when Robert started sitting near her in the cafeteria, she told him to ignore all the other kids. Usually they made fun of his clothes. His family was poor and couldn't afford new things. Robert always answered with an, Okay, and blushed heavily. Sometimes he gave her some Skittles. She accepted just one, orange-flavored, of course, because Skittles were hard to stop eating once you started. Then, this past spring, Megan found herself sneaking upstairs to her locker during recess. She had to get a lunch ticket she owed to one of her friends. She saw Robert sitting by himself in the cafeteria, waiting patiently for the bell to ring. She never saw him outside with the other kids anymore. He was teased pretty badly, so he must have stopped going outside altogether. Megan crept up closer to the side of the door and waved. But he didn't see her, just kept glancing up at the clock and pushing food around on his tray and waiting for the bell to ring. She decided right then and there to help him find a friend. It would be her mission before school was over. For some reason, she now had power over the boys in her class. She could tell them to do something, and they would argue a little, but eventually they always did what she asked. It was pretty strange. When his body was found that same evening, school was canceled for the remainder of the week. Megan stayed in her room for 2 days. She didn't want to talk to anyone. Although she hadn't known him all that well, she wanted to go to the funeral. She felt it was the right thing to do. The funeral hall smelled of flowers and chemicals. People were dressed in black, and they all stood in a long line to see Robert in his casket. He wore new clothes, a nice black suit. But he still looked sad to her, even in death. People cried and hugged and argued. Robert's mother was religious, a devout Catholic, and kept saying that her baby was damned for eternity. Megan didn't know why anyone would think that, so she decided to ask her mother when she got home. His family believes that when you kill yourself, it's an unpardonable sin. Oh, what does unpardonable mean? You know what pardon means, right? Yes, like when you're in jail for a long time and then you're forgiven for being bad, so they let you out. That's right. Unpardonable is the opposite. It means it can't be forgiven. Not ever. What if the person is really nice but just feels kinda lonely and sad? It doesn't matter if the person is good or evil, Megan. That's not how the Bible works. Suicide is against God's will, so the person goes to hell. There's no gray area. There's only light and dark. 5. A Ghost in the Shadows. On the second morning, Megan realized the candle wasn't going to last the entire 3 days of darkness. Her mother had told her that it was a special candle made of pure beeswax, which burned really slow. It was labeled 3-day devotional candle, but they had lit the candle the night the power went out. From what Megan could remember, they had played cards for 4 hours. So she needed a way to extend the life of the candle at least that long. It might be tricky, but she could figure it out. I don't know if you can do it, Robert said from the shadows. She could see him vaguely in the dimness, swinging back and forth on a noose like a clock ticking in perfect rhythm. He had started talking to her an hour before. At first, she ignored him, covered her ears, and sang every song she could think of from the radio. But as time went on, she grew tired and eventually listened to him talk. It can't be done, Megan. The candle has a day left, at best. You can't make it last long enough, just like you couldn't help me. She had already apologized to him twice for not helping him, so Megan ignored him and thought about her predicament. She was starving and dehydrated at this point, lips cracked and starting to hurt. It was becoming harder to think clearly. Sometimes her vision blurred, and she had to close her eyes until everything returned to normal. Her body felt heavy and slow. She hobbled over to the candle, knelt down, and began pressing the sides of the wax toward the center, as if building up a sandcastle on the beach. Hopefully, it would cause the wick to burn slower, but she had to be extra careful. One quick move, and the candle would go out. "That won't work," Robert said. "It might if I keep doing it." "No, it won't. You have to start thinking outside the box." "Like how?" "It's your birthday tomorrow, right?" Megan forgot all about her birthday. She would turn 10 tomorrow. Her mother had a chocolate cake wrapped in tinfoil, hidden away in the freezer, labeled lasagna. It was funny because Megan wasn't a little kid anymore. The trick wasn't fooling anyone. Then Megan thought of all the frosting and sugar, and her mouth began watering. 2 days without food was hard. 3 days would be unbearable. She tried not to think about food at all. She had other things to ponder. "Haven't you ever made a birthday wish?" Robert asked. "Yes, many times." "Why don't you make a wish?" She was tired. She put her head down and decided to sleep. "I'll think about it." She held the watch close to her ear, listening to it tick away. Her mother always wore that particular watch. It still smelled like her. Megan drifted off to sleep. 6. The Morning Star. Megan awoke from strange dreams and realized her right hand was missing. Her arm didn't hurt at all. There was just a stump of flesh that felt smooth to the touch. Somewhere out in the dark, she could hear her mother's watch ticking like a mechanical insect, taunting her, buzzing closer, fading. Megan cried. "What's wrong?" Robert asked from the dark. He still swung back and forth on the noose, but now he moved faster, and the sounds of the rope were louder. She tried to answer him, but she couldn't talk. Sobs racked her. She motioned to her missing hand. "Looks like the flame tipped too far to one side while you were sleeping," he said. "And then it looks like the melting wax created a blind spot. You should be glad it didn't take your head." Megan wiped the tears from her eyes and checked on the candle. Robert was right. The candle had melted to one side, and the flame was almost extinguished. The other side of the candle was a tower of wax. "What now?" Robert asked. "Do you think making a wish to God will work?" "It would be praying, not wishing. But you aren't Christian, so I'm not sure. Are you baptized?" "No." "Then it won't work. God only likes people who are baptized." "I could try making a wish. It is my birthday." "That's what I would do. Like when you wish on a falling star." "Right." "Did you know that the name Lucifer means light bearer in Latin? It was a name given to the morning star. Funny how they change little things around like that." Megan tried her best to ignore him. His conversations had become much stranger and darker. She decided to concentrate on the task at hand. She sat and thought for a long time. She knew she couldn't make the candle last for another day. Her watch was gone, and she wouldn't last much longer without food and water. So, after much thought on the matter, she decided to take the initiative. She closed her eyes and made her wish. "What did you wish for?" Robert asked. "I can't tell." "Oh, that's right. Because if you tell, then it won't come true, right?" "Right." "Now, blow out the candle to seal the deal." Megan nodded and blew out the candle. As soon as she did it, she realized her mistake. Robert's laughter filled the void. The darkness slammed her to the ground. It spread her limbs apart until tendons snapped and ligaments ripped. She screamed, and the darkness spilled into her mouth, burning like hot oil slipping down her throat, deep into her lungs. Then she was falling. When she landed, she didn't hit the ground. A long stake drove through her. Her broken limbs flopped uselessly at her sides as she choked on blood and charred wood. It was at that moment, her body broken and slipping down the stake an inch at a time, when Megan realized her wish had come true. She had wanted more than anything to be with her mother and father again. They were impaled right next to her.